pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call, please?
Member Hurley?
Present.
Member Young?
Present.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith?
Present.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Thursday, June 6th, famous day, of course. Here we are. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Anybody have any comments on that or anything that we want to add to that?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. Next we have...
We're going to do a motion?
Yes, I'll do a motion then to approve the agenda for June 6th, 2024.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Member Young?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith?
Yes.
Member Hurley?
Yes.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now that we're at the portion for audience comments, I don't know if there's anyone in the audience that wants to make a comment now. I know there's some people that might be here to speak on certain specific agenda items, and if that's the case, you can just wait and speak at that point. But with that being said, does anybody have any general audience comments they want to give at this point? Okay, let's move on then. Approval of minutes. Has anybody had opportunity? I mean, I have to look at the minutes from last year's last month's meeting.
Yes. I move that we approve them.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith?
Approved.
Member Hurley?
Yes.
Member Young?
Yes.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, first thing as action items, we have a certificate of appropriateness number 24021 dealing with the property at 107 29th Avenue. Staff, do you have a presentation? Hey, Brandon.
Good afternoon. Roll the PowerPoint, please. So this is certificate of appropriateness case number 24021 for 107 29th Avenue. Applicants are Carla and Howard Paul Markowitz. The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for this contributing property in Pastor Grill to remove a second-story 5 by 16-foot open balcony and replace it with a new 8 by 16-foot covered balcony on the west, which is the rear elevation of this residential building. Here's a listing of exhibits. The property has the RU2 zoning. It is within the Pastor Grill Overlay District. As mentioned previously, this is a contributing structure to the Pastor Grill Overlay. Here's an aerial photograph, 130 by 50 feet. Some photographs of the site. This is showing the front, which is the south-facing side of the structure. Another. You can see the rear of the structure in its current condition. We were out just a few days ago. Some demolition work has already started. Another. And another showing the decorative support brackets. And another from further out. There's a sidewalk at the rear of the property near the dunes. And another. Here is the proposed rear rendering for the structure. So this is a certificate of appropriateness. The property is on a contributing structure to the Pastor Grill Historic District. This is coming before you because any certificate of any encroachment into the underlying zoning district setbacks, so any improvement that is any closer than 20 feet to the rear property line needs to be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Board if the property is contributing. Typically, they would go on to the Board of Adjustment after this for a variance. However, this board does have limited approval powers for variances as long as the setback is at least 10 feet. The applicant is requesting a setback of 12 feet, so it is within your powers to approve this, and they not need to move forward to the Board of Adjustment. I'll skip the Secretary of the Interior standards. These were covered in your staff report. Staff recommends approval, however, with 3 conditions. I'll go back to the photos to show you what I'm talking about with these. This is the current condition, and Lynn had prepared the staff report. She had recommended these 3 conditions. First, that the existing wrought iron railing on the 2nd story be either reused or an identical railing be used as possible for the 2nd story of the remodel. The second is that the posts, and you can see those there on the ground in front of the stairs, that the existing white columns be reutilized for the supports. I'll go back to the proposed rendering. They were proposing rectangular wood-like columns. She had recommended that they be white to match the existing, gray to match the existing. And then also that the decorative support columns that you can see more clearly here be reutilized. Those were not proposed to be used for the 2nd story. Otherwise, staff recommends approval of the requested certificate of appropriateness based on the staff findings for this contributing property to repair and replace the rear balcony and covered patio that were damaged by storms and rain this past spring, and as described in the application and staff findings. This request includes the removal of the 2nd story open balcony and replacement with a 3-foot longer covered balcony. The related doors and windows will remain as is. This request is made pursuant to Land Development Code Section 20.10 and would result in a rear setback to the balcony addition of approximately 12.1 feet. And here are your action options: motions to approve, approve with conditions, or deny the certificate of appropriateness. We do have the applicant present if you have any questions, and I could handle what I could for the staff report.
Well, I guess the questions I would just have from what you've said is these 3 conditions that you just mentioned, is the applicants agreeing to do that, or are we at an impasse as far as that goes?
I know they were mentioned to the applicant. They are present. They can speak to whether they're in agreement or not.
And then along that line, if we, in talking with them, if we determine as a unit here that maybe of the 3 we don't agree with, all 3 of them are okay with none of them, or 1 of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them, can we go ahead and just do that? And that's
absolutely their recommendations. Typically, this would not move on to the Board of Adjustment. You have the power to approve this as almost an effective variance, but you could change the conditions or add if you feel they're necessary.
Right, but whatever we just determined today, this would be the final say as far as that.
Correct.
Under the
Yes.
circumstances. Right.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions of Brandon? Okay, does the applicant want to come forward, or anybody want to come speak about this?
Hey, good afternoon. My name's Sean Roney with Roney Design Group. We are the architectural designers of the project over at Roney Design Group, 535 Central Avenue, Suite M1, St. Petersburg, Florida, 33701 is the address. We concur with staff's approval, recommendation for approval, and the conditions. We did want to kind of discuss, I think, the possibility if we can get the column approved as a square. It was recommended for a round. We designed it as a square, but staff is recommending a round column. I did have some conversations with Lynn Rossetti. She said that they could most likely support the square as long as they're really concerned about the color. The color seems like it was consistently white throughout the years, so we're okay with abiding by that color. We just wanted to see if we could change that condition from round to square. So.
Well, let me ask you this about that, because I mean, we've got some pictures to look at, and certainly, you know, in my opinion, the back of the house there as squares doesn't conflict with anything else I can see in that picture. Are there other columns in the front or side of the house that are round or square or wood or whatever, you know?
Yeah, well, the idea is to have a rough sawn wood look column, and that's kind of the consistency. I think there was a south side picture. There's a front entry. But it's really hard to tell from the view.
Yeah, I'm trying to, here we go. There's some pictures.
Yeah, these 2 columns on either side of the stairway here, they appear square to me. And being out on the side a few times, they're really a lot smaller. They look like 6x6 or 8x8. But other than that, the the reuse of the brackets, the railings, were in agreement for those conditions. That we were just asking if we could have an approval for the square versus the round.
And the squares, that's going to be, is it going to be wood in look, or is it actually going to be wood?
It's essentially a wrap, so the structural column
Yep.
it's going to be surrounding a structural column, so it's a composite material to prevent weatherization and whatnot. So it appears to be a wood.
Okay. And the roof line, and by that I'm talking about where the barrel tile is, that's being extended a little bit further, right, on the second floor?
That's correct, yeah. Currently, there's approximately a 3-foot eyebrow or awning that
Right.
is over the door. So essentially, you know, obviously you can kind of see the damage to the structure. We're trying to completely cover the second floor balcony, so that we can eliminate having, you know, rain and saltwater exposure to the balcony surface itself. I think that was.
And is the angle, I know this sounds picky, but is the angle the same, you know what I'm saying? Maybe it's just because it's shorter, when you look at the house in the back, you see that.
Correct,
And
yeah.
in this picture, just because it's a picture, a different picture of the proposed look, it's almost as if that roof line looks flat and you really can't see that.
Yeah,
But is it, maybe it's just,
it's a similar slope. If you, I don't know who has control over the slideshow here, but if you could go to the proposed rendering,
yeah,
there we go. So there's, as you can see, we can't go very much taller because of the parapet wall there, and then there is a tile feature. If you could go to the existing photo, yeah, right there. See above that, it kind of drops down a little bit. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to tuck that new roof underneath this center tile feature. So
yeah, but, okay, so the center tile feature on the rooftop, that remains, correct?
correct, yeah.
Okay, you can't see it in this one, in the proposed picture. That's kind of what I was thinking of. Okay, good, all right.
Yeah.
And then in the proposed picture there, it looks like you've got the same, isn't that the same railing as in the older one?
It is, and I think that's just a product of the computer modeling that, so there's a lot of ornate details on the original railing that just is really difficult to try to replicate. But the intention to start with was to match that
Okay,
railing.
and so what you're asking for, looking at the proposed rendering, we've got the square columns, the railing seems like the same there, and then there's that little, I don't even know what they call it, that angled look that you're supposed to add?
The support braces.
Is that in the next picture, I guess, if we go back to the original picture?
I think it was
Yeah,
the
exactly.
columns
That right
railing,
there.
the apron.
Is that what we're talking about, that little triangular piece that goes up under the edge?
Correct. Yeah, and that,
The corables.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for, thank you.
yeah, exactly. So that's something that Len and I discussed, and what we're gonna try to do is reuse those in a similar location, up back at the house underneath the beam, so it has the appearance to kind of stay in that same location.
Okay.
Reuse that bracket.
And so, but that, just so I'm clear, that was, Brandon, that was the third issue, right? Was it with those particular things? Correct. Okay.
And I think, according to the master site file paperwork, the style is defined as mission. And I think the square columns are more in conformance with the mission style than the round columns are. So maybe at some time those round columns were made round and maybe they were originally square.
Correct. And I agree with that. You know, we've done our fair share of mission style homes, and that's the reason why we went to the square. It's hard to tell when this was added. It appears to be an addition because there's steel columns there, and the house was built in the 20s. So, you know, I don't think that material was prevalent in that era. And again, with a steel column and then a composite round, you know, wraps around it, probably was somewhere in the 2000s, maybe early 90s. But yeah, so that was kind of our initial thought process on that, was which we believed was appropriate, was the square columns.
I agree.
Okay, another question I have, just bear with me here, because I'm looking at the proposed drawing. Now, this is the extra size is going towards the back, not going towards the sides of the building, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so if you look at the photograph that has either those corbels on that we were just looking at, up in the upper right corner, or upper left corner of the house is that little panel that's on both sides. You follow what I'm talking about?
Were you on the roof or?
No, it's on the wall, so it would be
Okay.
just to the left of
Between the roof overhang and the corbel.
Correct,
those little there's a panel on each side, right?
correct.
And I see there a couple pictures shows it on both sides. Is that remaining?
I think that's to be determined once we get.
Because that's a nice little architectural feature, really, you know,
Yeah.
that makes it, they don't do that stuff too much anymore, and that's what makes this house, I think, that makes the house look a little extra neater, or extra historic, because it has that.
Right.
Brandon, did you guys consider that at all, ever look at that, or you got any opinion on that? If you know what I'm talking about?
I agree with you.
Well, could we make that a condition? Could we, like, say, let's see, to have them keep, I mean, that's something that looks like, I don't know, and I'm not a construction guy, but you're gonna redo that whole back wall, right?
Pretty much,
Which
yeah.
you
I
pretty
mean,
much
there's
have to.
water damage and
Right.
new stucco that's needing
And is that
to-
something that can be retained and then reused?
I believe so. I think after, if you don't mind going back to the existing or the current stage, are you talking about those right there with the squares on each side?
Yeah, yes.
Right, correct. Yeah, and the idea is we're not going any wider. So if everything plays out correctly, you know, those probably won't be disturbed.
Okay, they're just not included in the proposed
Correct,
rendering?
yeah.
Okay,
So yeah, we can make a condition to
all right.
have those either replaced if disturbed or to remain, you know. So I'm in agreement with that as well, so.
Anybody have any more questions? Or anybody else want to talk about this? Well, I would make a motion that we grant the certificate of appropriateness. Make sure I get this right.
For two of the conditions or all three?
Yeah, well, hold on. In case number 24021, with the condition that the wrought iron rails be used, or the
Reused.
reused or similar ones, that the decorative support column be used, that those pieces we just talked about, those, I don't even know what we would call those corner panels, no, be used, and also that you could go with the square columns. So I'm asking, my motion is allow the square columns and kind of replace another condition with those two corner panels. Reuse those.
I'd second it.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith,
Approve.
Member Hurley,
Yes.
Member Young,
Yes.
Chair Lowry,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have an action item on a design review, number 24036, located at 1003 Gulf Way.
So this is only a design review, no associated certificate of appropriateness, 1003 Gulf Way, case number 24036. The applicant and the owners are present. And staff is requesting Historic Preservation Board design review of a new single-family residence constructed to the house medium standards of the Passerville Overlay District, which is being constructed as a redevelopment of the subject property. The property is at, again, 1003 Gulf Way. This is in the RLM2 residential district and also within the Passerville Overlay. Here is the front. It's an isometric rendering of the structure standing at the western side looking toward the east. and another that is more directly head-on. Here's the rear elevation. No rendering for this one, but it was in your packet as part of the building plans for this home. And then the north and south sides of the structure. Here's the site plan for the proposed new residence. This has gone through multiple rounds of zoning review. I have met multiple times with the applicant on this project, and they have, at least on the zoning side, made the structure fully compliant with the city's zoning code. It does meet all the setbacks. It does meet the requirements for landscaping and encroachments and height and so on. So this is on the zoning side, at least, complete and ready to issue pending a design review. Looking at the adjacent properties, this structure will be larger than both of its neighbors. To the north is 1005 Gulf Way, and to the south 1001 Gulf Way. It does generally retain the Key West style, and there tend to be larger structures, of course, on the Gulf Way side of Paso Grill compared to the interior streets. However, it will be larger, anywhere between 20%. It's about 20% larger than its southern neighbor, and up to 50% larger for some of the older structures on the same block face. Staff consultant Tara Salmieri did review the design and had no concerns, finding the design to meet the adopted standards. The proposed revisions, there are currently, of course, pending revisions to Division 20 that would eliminate the common yard frontage in favor of requiring a projecting porch or stoop at the frontage. The applicant does have a porch below the structure. However, the Land Development Code, in meeting the frontage requirement, requires that element to project off the front. Currently, the common yard, the landscaping is an option. That is something that's proposed to be modified under the Division 20 changes. However, the applicant is permitted to utilize the common yard frontage at this time. And as mentioned before, the design is compliant with the setback height and other development standards for the house medium construction style, and the proposed landscaping does meet the minimum planning standards. That's on the zoning review side. Staff recommends approval with one condition: any major alterations to this residence while under construction, including significant exchange or alteration of facade materials, window design, or frontage elements or colors, as determined by staff, shall require this case to return to the Historic Preservation Board.
So one question
yes.
about that. So the significant is the part that's as determined by staff, right? Okay. What determines significant
Well,
change?
any of those elements, so any major change to the window design, change, a wood look instead of a stucco or something like that, that would definitely be major.
And being considered significant is staff opinion, not builder or homeowner opinion, right?
That would be staff opinion. Of course, if the historic board would like to lay out specific conditions, that would be welcome. But
Well, let me ask you this, because this seems to be a recommendation with this part that I haven't quite seen before that I can remember. Okay, so this is kind of, if it's approved, then they are under the direction of building it as they've said so far, except for if they, in the middle of it, decided they wanted to change something. Apparently, they could, as long as it wasn't significant. And then what happens if they do want to change something that's significant? Where do we go? And it's supposed to come back in front of us. Where do we go at that point?
Well,
Just a stop order or stop build or what?
it would return to you before moving forward if there were to be any alterations. And this is very close to issuance. I believe on the building side it is as well. So if this is something that they receive approval to proceed with today, I don't have any indication that they are planning to alter any elements.
Right.
The applicant is present; he can speak to that.
Right. I guess what I'm saying though, wouldn't technically this be the recommendation we'd have in a way on every design build?
We use standards like this for, we've recommended conditions like this in the past, but it's not codified, so I just want to make sure that it makes it in there.
Okay. I mean, I don't have any opposition to it. I'm just saying it just seems a little bit new, and I just wonder if this is maybe something that from the city's point of view, is another little check the box. That's a good thing to add. I mean, I don't disagree. But.
I agree with that, and typically this is something that's automatic for certificates of appropriateness and other locally designated structures that are being altered. We automatically bring these things back to you because that's part of the approval process.
Well, I know sometimes we actually you know, we leave it to you, or you bring it back to us. Is that kind of what we're still talking about?
Correct.
Okay, so, but in those cases, usually there's something that hasn't quite been figured out yet.
Correct.
And in this case, it seems like they supposedly figured it out, but this is just the catch-all in case there's a change.
Just in
Is
case
that
there's
fair to say?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Okay, because one of the questions I would have, just kind of in looking at the plans, you know, and you know, I looked at them pretty closely, but at my little home computer, I was having a problem with some of it. But, you know, for example, the siding that is in the plans. I hope I'm not jumping ahead here, but.
No.
So it's that nice kind of shingle look or something. Is that something, this is just an example question I have, is that something that they're committed to, or is that just something that's just for a drawing?
It's been annotated on the plans, and we would be approving the design as it's brought forward
As
to
it
you
looks.
today. Right, this is in for permitting. A lot of times we bring this to you before they apply for a permit, but this is in for permitting and pending issuance.
Yeah, on the drawing, it shows kind of the little shake shingle siding, and on the color rendering, it looks more like just a flat hardy. I mean, they're both fine, but they're not the same in the drawing versus the color
Yeah, I
rendering.
noticed that too.
Yeah, that's just, if I can pipe in.
Sure.
I'm the designer and creator.
Would you just put your name on the record, though?
Yes, Michael McCoy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the way the rendering with my computer program, the rendering program, doesn't really take up the
Hard to get those
shapes.
little lines.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Brandon, I have a couple more questions for you before we'll get back to you, Mr. McCoy, I'm sure. So this is being built under the overlay, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And could you build this exact same structure under the underlying zone?
In terms of height and other features, yes, it couldn't be built because of the size of the lot, and also that the front setback in particular it's closer to the front lot line than the rear line would
Okay,
permit.
so in choosing to build this under the overlay as opposed to the underlying zone, they can build a bigger structure. Is that true?
That's correct. They haven't maxed out the setbacks under the overlay, but it does allow for that, yes.
But it's bigger than the underlying zone.
Correct, yes.
All right.
The footprint, yes.
And I'll bring this together in a minute when I just want to get these questions. And so that exact same design, that's a second way of asking the same question, that same design couldn't be built under the underlying zone.
Correct.
Right, okay. Okay.
I have a question about height, and I may be just shooting. We have a roof height of 3710. Based on a 512 roof pitch, you're talking about an overall 44-foot height at maximum. Are we still going from middle of the gable, or what is our, I mean, we're still at 43 feet. 41 feet. It doesn't show it on there. You have to do the calculations yourself.
Okay. Yes, and
So you have a 512 pitch on the roof with a roof height or a ceiling height of 3710. You're adding basically just over 6 feet, or roughly 6 feet, to the top. So that we're going to be at 44 feet at the top maximum. And are we measuring from mid part of the gable, or whatever you want to call it, even though that's a hip?
no, I believe that 44, that is from mean sea level, not from grade. The grade, I'm doing this from memory, but if I remember, it's about 5 feet, 4 or 5 feet. I could try to pull up the
You've got
survey
6.6 on the grade on the ground floor.
for the first floor.
So yeah, they've got it elevated 6 foot, 6 foot 6.
You know, I think I left off the west elevation because of the renderings, but that information should be in the packet. I can get that pulled up just a moment.
And Sean, were you asking if we're doing an average roof height or an actual?
And trying to determine, because I thought we were supposed to be in the 30-somethings, and we're at 37 at the base ceiling, and yet we're at 44 at the top of the roof. And if we're doing even midway through the gable, you're still at 41, which I still thought we were at 38.
It's a lot of math.
I mean, he mentioned it was going to be bigger, but it's going to be mammoth compared to some of the other ones if it's going to be that much taller than everybody else.
Yeah, I'm pulling those up here.
I lost my page.
While Brandon's looking that up, I have a typographical error for correction. On the staff report, it refers to design review case number 23036. I think that should be 24036.
Yes. So here is the, thank you for that. We could pull up the overhead. Orient this.
Yeah, I don't see those dimensions on the stuff that I've got here.
So measuring from grade at 5'6" up 8 feet, it's another 2710 to the roof midpoint, and then another 3.5 feet to the ridge. So they are, it's very close, but they are about 6 inches under the maximum height based on the current adopted standard. I can zoom in a bit more.
And so for me being challenged here at the moment, so we say that height shall not exceed 28 feet in height to the midpoint of a sloped roof. Okay, so we're talking about the 28, but we've added on 13 feet?
It's 28 added on to the 8, the base 8. So that would be 36 feet from grade to the roof midpoint,
Right.
and then 40 feet overall. And the total height of the structure with this approximate 6-inch difference is about 39.6 from grade.
Okay.
That had to do with my reading.
And I'm going to make a couple comments, and part of this is, and I want you folks obviously to speak in a moment, but I think this might be relevant to some of the other stuff we're doing in the historic board, not necessarily your build right now, but how we're trying to redo a few things and things become more apparent. So, well, I want to start talking about the house itself. Are we ready to start talking about it, or is there anything more you want to say? First, let me just say this. I think it's a very nice house, and it's not my opinion that makes a difference about what it looks like or doesn't look like. What bothers me, I suppose, is since it's being built under the overlay, and what I'm concerned about are homes that are being built under the overlay so they can build a bigger house, okay? And the overlay, as you know now, they have a choice to build it under the underlying zone or the overlay. And we're proposing in the future just to keep it down to just the overlay. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about in the future, if that happens, we have to do the overlay. So if you look at the purpose and intent for the overlay, it says new development that is consistent with the existing mass and scale within the district. And so the key word in the overlay is historic. So I look at this house and I say, what about this house says historic in any fashion? Okay, it's essentially, and again, this is no offense, I'm just speaking quickly, it's pretty much a rectangle where it's been, every floor has been maxed, I think, to basically the size that they can build it. And so the spirit, I would say, of building under the overlay would to build homes that look more like the other homes that already exist in the historic district, that are consistent, as the statute says, or the ordinance says, consistent with the existing mass and scale within the district. And, if I look at this house, and if I was to drive down the street, I would just say, there's a new house. And that we get a lot of that on Pass the Grill. The new houses, And it's like, what about this house, since it's being built under the overlay, has any kind of historic feel to it? And that's why I was asking questions earlier about the shingles and the shakes and that kind of stuff, because those are the kind of details that obviously add I think, a more historic look. But when I look at the general dimensions of it, I think an argument can be made, and I appreciate it because I know how valuable and expensive the property is down there, is all we're getting is everyone wanting to build to the max. And that's their right, okay? But it's trying to fit it into a historic district, which people have bought, knowing hopefully that they're buying into a historic district. You know, I look at this house, which again is a beautiful house, and I really don't have a big problem with it. I mean, it's nice. But then I look at some other new houses that are built that you could say, other than having to add the first floor for FEMA, that house could have been built in 1930, or it could have been built in 1940. Now, I'm not saying that everyone has to do that, but I guess my question is, in this build, what's historic about it? Or what makes it fit into, it's clearly going to be much bigger than the houses around it. And I understand that with FEMA, that's going to be par for the course, especially if you have a home next to it that was built pre-FEMA. I know in this case, the house to the south, I believe, is a new build that's got a FEMA first floor, and I believe, looks that way anyway. And the house to the north is an older home that has still living on the first floor. And so I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around as we go in the future and look at these things and decide what we want to do. Are we giving the green flag to building homes that arguably don't really have a historic aspect about them? And so I'm throwing that out because I want Mr. McCoy, I want these people to say, based on what I'm kind of my concerns that I have, how do you explain that, or what would you say to me?
I can give you some feedback.
Good. Well, come on up.
Sure.
And I hope I'm not being offensive. I'm just trying. Okay.
I know where you're coming from. So here's my take. You'll never be able to replicate mass and scale of the historic district, primarily because everything was built below floodplain. So you're talking about the older homes that, might be one story, might be two story, built back in the 20s and 30s. So obviously to build a new structure, we've got to elevate it, so you've got that ground floor that's nothing but garage. So, the minute you put two living floors on it, you got 3 floors. So there's nothing you can do about that as far as trying to make it match the historic area of Mass and stuff.
Right, and I understand that.
Oh, yeah. Now, I think what the board can do is think in terms of style, materials. Like in our particular lot, it's a 42-foot wide lot, very narrow lot.
Right.
So I don't have the ability to have a lot of animation in the footprint of the home to have several offsets and create a lot of softness. But if you want to try to think about materials like the shingle siding or even a horizontal siding or metal roof and shingle roofs, things like that, or that are more old-fashioned and historic, that would be a good way for the board to try to tackle that to keep the flavor in future builds. And then it's a very interesting situation down here between the underlying district
Right.
and then the overlay district. Now, in our case, the underlying district actually helped us with regards to side yard setbacks, because I could have gone 3-foot side yard setbacks instead of 5-foot, which is the overlay. Okay, so that worked to our disadvantage. The only thing that actually worked to our advantage in this was the front, because we have a lesser front yard setback. But there's houses along the block that also have the lesser front yard setbacks. And I think that's probably the whole reasoning behind the overlay district to begin with. At some point, someone realized, well, you've got these older homes that have a 10-foot, 8-foot, 12-foot front yard setback, and someone wanting to build new, it's kind of hard to, tell them they can't do it. So I get the whole gist, but it's probably good to somehow combine it and have just the one district and try to work out some of those details.
Well, I'll give you an example of what concerns me, and I think that's probably one of the reasons we're talking about maybe eliminating the choice is there's 2 homes right on Gulf Way as you approach 14th. One's on the corner of 14th. They're both brand new builds. They're both huge homes. Okay, but one was built under the overlay and one was built under the underlying zone. The one built under the overlay sticks out at least 5 or 6 or 7 feet further in the front, which has totally ruined the southern view of the front yard of the house next to them.
Right.
And so as we go forward, I would like to see that kind of issue not exist, okay? And I appreciate what you told me about the side setbacks, and that makes me feel better about it.
Because my original design was actually wider, and then we, you know,
Right.
and then after talking to Brandon and figuring out which way to go, you know, then we had to shrink it in.
Well, because I'm concerned that the overlay can be used just to build a bigger home without any spirit historic aspect to it.
Right.
Right, and so that's why
I think he will be just having a clear set of guidelines on the style, the aesthetic style that you're looking for.
Well, we plan on doing a design guidebook and doing some things of that nature that will make it a little more forthcoming. But, you know, I guess the point or reason I'm asking is, you know, there are certain homes that have built where clearly the buyers, the owners want it to look like a historic look.
Right.
And then there's some that maybe don't, or I don't know, maybe the architect just puts it together and they go, okay, you know.
Yeah, and it's
so.
tough when you get, you know, and every lot can be different. I mean, if I've got 60, 70 feet to work with, totally different story, right?
Right.
But when you're talking 42-foot wide lot, you know, and you're talking
I
a
know.
32-foot wide home, there's only so much you can put on one living floor. So you can't really get, you know, someone's buying a piece of property and they want, you know, 4 bedrooms and all the things to go in a home. It's hard. You can't. You're really forced to go to.
No, I get that, and again, this will sound, I don't mean to be offensive like this, but
No.
but it's also the choice of the buyer.
Right.
You know, maybe they don't need as big a bedroom because they live on the beach. Maybe they don't, you know, maybe because Pastor Girl has small homes and the scale's small, maybe they bring back what they think they really need to have. You know, we talk about people that want to put areas on their rooftop, and the elevator goes up so they can look at the ocean. So it's like, I would say, why don't you just walk 50 feet down to the beach and look at it? You know, and so I think we have to keep that in mind as we go forward with all this kind of stuff, that it's, you know, it's not Celebration Station, you know, it's an old historic neighborhood. And so when we're supposed to do our duty to preserve this and encourage this, it makes me ask these kind of questions, I guess. So, and I appreciate what you've told
We're trying to
me.
be sensitive with the design.
I'm sure you are,
Roof
right.
and you know, siding and in the front porch to soften up, you know, the public view,
Right.
and, you know, trying to be good stewards here.
Okay. Any of you folks have any questions, Mr. McCoy?
I'm good.
Anyone else?
I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve design review case 24036 with a condition that any major alterations to the residence while under construction, including significant exchange or alteration of facade materials, window designs, or frontage elements or colors, as determined by the staff, shall require this case to return to the Historic Preservation Board, and we would encourage you to use any historic design elements that you can.
I'll second the motion.
Member Hurley?
Yes.
Member Young?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith?
Yes.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Let's see.
I do have one question, not connected to that approval, with regard to the demolition permit.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was not a contributing structure, is that why that application for demolition was not brought to us?
Is that a yes you're saying? Yeah.
Even though it was within the district, because it was not a contributing structure, it wasn't brought to the board?
Correct. As currently written, it's only for contributing and locally designated structures that they come forward.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, I was thought maybe I missed that permit
I know,
somewhere.
like,
Okay.
I went back to the meeting that I wasn't here, and I'm like, okay, it wasn't there.
Okay. Okay, all right, so we're moving on to subsection 5, discussion items. We're talking about rezoning of CG1 and INS parcels in Paso Grill. Go ahead, Brandon.
So this is just a continuation of the discussion that we started last month regarding the properties just south of, well, the entrance to Vina Del Mar on those 2 blocks. Effectively, there's 2 ways if the board would like to look into any kind of rezoning or use amendments for those parcels. The staff report, the agenda report rather, lays out those 2 options. There could either be a rezoning of the parcels, or there could be the inclusion of those parcels into the historic overlay. They both have their own challenges. From a zoning and planning standpoint, usually a full parcel rezoning is looked at as a bigger challenge because you're affecting the use and the other rights that come with a piece of land. The challenge with including these parcels into an overlay would be that there aren't currently all of this, the full range of building types that would be available to these properties if they were to redevelop at some point in the future are not laid out in the overlay, because the overlay doesn't have a consideration, for example, for a marina facility or a larger hotel. And those are currently uses that are eligible to the properties, just those 2 blocks worth of properties. So I just, if that's something that the board would like us to move forward on looking into, we would just like some general direction on how you would like it handled.
Well, I was thinking about this a little bit, and of course, you'd answered some questions for me earlier this week. And one of the things that I was going through, which we'll get to later today, some of the drafting of maybe some of the changes, it struck me as how in the design build we do have an area for commercial, but I say to myself, why? Because there's nothing commercial in the overlay, right?
We do have a few.
I mean, unless I'm missing something, I don't think there's nothing zone commercial. The only area zone commercial is not in the overlay.
We have a few currently in the overlay. We do have a few properties on the Paso Grill Way side of 10th, I believe it is, just north of the park. Those are residential office retail. It's limited commercial, definitely not as intense as what they could have at the 2 blocks we're talking
I understand
about.
we're talking about ROR, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and
right.
I'm not including that because that does have a residential component, but I'm just talking about there's the only commercial area is that area that's not in the overlay. So if we take the step, or let's say we suppose we aren't going to put that in the overlay. Let's just say that for a second. So like we did on 8th Avenue, or someone did before I was around, we changed that, we created its own zone, the CRD, okay, which took it out of the overlay, I think, in a mistake, and now we're trying to put it back in this next little group for reasons I don't need to go in again. But there we created a specialized zone for really those 2 blocks there in Paso Grill.
Correct.
And I'm wondering whether that's the approach we should have on this commercial area, is try to, I don't know effectively if that would be rezoning, I guess it is, but create a specialized commercial zone that only applies to the historic district. Because, again, it strikes me that it would seem to be inconsistent to take the very middle of Paso Grill and apply the same commercial standards as you can up here at the north end of St. Pete Beach.
Right.
Because it's when you talk about the historic district and mass and scale and all those things we talked about a moment ago, they suddenly don't apply for something that's right in the heart of Paso Grill. And so it strikes me that we ought to be able to come up with some sort of a hybrid scenario like we have at the CRD, where we aren't necessarily affecting the property rights or the resale value, but we at least get a little more control over it, where we can put some historic language into that zone to kind of let people know that this is a historic, area. And does that make sense what I'm saying? Maybe go about it in that fashion?
It does. And when the CRDEA was adopted, the Paso Grill overlay was not nearly as thorough as it is today. Right. It was really a height, and it allowed for the certificate of appropriateness that you saw earlier today, limited variances. in anything dimensional could be handled through the overlay. So anything related to height, related to setbacks, related to any kind of design criteria the board would like to have over those properties, those could all be handled through the overlay. That is a much more straightforward process. If we were to go with a full rezoning, and that would also be a future land use amendment, which is what the CRDEA went through, that is a much more involved process. The county does get involved with that. That would be used, and what the overlay could not do, at least as currently drafted, is any kind of use control, if that's what the board was concerned about, but it doesn't seem to be. You seem to be, you just want to be able to review these developments. You would like them to be.
I guess what I'm saying is this, and I think you just kind of fleshed that a little bit. So we could, instead of doing like a new zoning for the area, we could just
simply
we could
absorb
say it's part of the overlay, but it has its own special height, dimensions, rules that apply that are maybe different from every place else on the overlay, but it would just apply to the specifics of being in a commercial area.
And we would probably, I would at least recommend you handle that through the building types, especially because we're going through that process currently. For example, the building types have an institutional building type, but there's only one property that currently applies to, and that's the church. And the specification is that in order to redevelop, there has to be an existing institutional building on the site. So it could be similar. There could be similar language that limits it to the properties that are in the CG, the commercial zoning.
Okay, we're getting pretty.
So our options here are either rewrite the commercial zoning altogether and make it part of the overlay, or leave the commercial zoning, absorb it into the overlay, and then we have design review on the existing zoning, but at least we have design review because it's part of our bubble.
Those are the most straightforward, having either its own zoning district or being part of the overlay with amended standards. The only other option that I could think of would be to amend the actual use standards in those districts, but that would affect the city, the whole city, not just Paso Grillo.
I think we go with trying to look at it from putting it in the overlay with amended standards.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's the best way, because as I said, one of the problems, as I mentioned before, when they created the CRD and took it out of the overlay, they took all that beautiful language about historic, contribution, how it fits in the neighborhood, mass and scale, and they took that all away because that was in the overlay, but not specifically in the CRD that we. And so now we're trying to add that language back in, and so I think we could put that type of language into that commercial area without affecting, anybody's rights about it, especially since there's only a couple of properties and nothing's in the hopper right now anyway, as far as I'm aware of. And as far as the institutional part, and this is just my opinion, the fire station, I don't know if anybody really cares that that's in the overlay from the standpoint that it's such a unique piece, and I think we would rather not trip up what the fire people want to do, and we'd like to help them along, so I don't even know if we need to kind of look at that. And it strikes me, you mentioned something about the church. What is, because also the yacht club and the women's club is institutional as well under the overlay.
Right, and in terms, there are certain elements that are specific to religious institutions.
Okay.
So that would be specific to them, but
Also, the
permissions.
site size.
Correct,
is
right.
quite a bit larger than the women's club. And
Okay, all right, that's in the details.
But for those institutional buildings and some of the same for lodging projects, it was just an example to say that it was written to apply only to those properties, to not allow for residential properties to convert and so on. So,
Okay.
is the board in agreement with that? Then that's something we could look into.
We'd be creating a CG1/PAG.
Yes. Although it would have with some altered aspects to it. I think that's something that I assume what we're talking about is you would have come up with some suggestions, Brandon, and we could talk about some of those things and then push that through as time goes on.
Correct, and Jennifer, if you don't mind, I believe the recommendation of the city commission was to potentially wait a few months for a workshop. Is that
Correct. They
is
wanted
that correct?
after
That'll
Yeah,
give
they
us
did do
time
that.
to.
After we
Okay.
have a new commission.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
When Joe's on board.
Yep, good. Well, then we can, you know.
That'll give us time.
propose that. Although it strikes me, I keep saying this, I'd like to do as much as we can when we go in front of the commission in a few months, okay? On the other hand, I don't want to have a lot of stuff that might trip things up, you know what I mean? And if this is an area that we need a little more time with, I don't have a problem with pushing that back a little bit.
Right, and the rezoning will be an independent process. I don't think that needs to go through any county boards, but it will drag out the process. So if you wanted to move forward with the Division 20 and 40 changes and then have this as a separate process, that would be appropriate.
I think that would make sense. Does everybody agree with that? Okay.
Okay.
That way we can get the work done that we've already started.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Before,
But we could certainly talk about it in the workshop because it all fits, it's part and parcel to a lot of these things we're trying to do, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. So now I guess we're going to informational items. Number 6, A was 3101 and 3105 Pasquarel Way zoning.
Yeah, I should have known better because I worked on the subdivision for this one, but the reason it was, I'm guessing the reason why it wasn't included in the overlay after 1999 was because they were actually the southernmost parcels. At the time, it was only one parcel of the Don Cesar plat, so it might have been left out for that reason. Those two properties were part of the
So
overlay.
it was considered Don Cesar neighborhood and not Paso Roble neighborhood,
Yes.
even
Well-
though it's on the other side of the sign.
Yeah, no, I think, but that's a guess on your behalf.
It is-
right?
it is
So
my
I understand
guess,
that.
yep.
And again, as we said last month, I don't know whether it really makes a difference because it's spilled milk. My whole point was, in my opinion, and I think if you follow the ordinances, clearly that was something the historic board should have been brought into because it changed the zoning of property south of 32nd. And so whether that was, you know, the best worst case scenario is, and I don't know because I wasn't at the meeting, the commissioners were told, hey, this is south of 32nd. Everything south of 32nd is in the overlay. If you're going to make this residential, it needs to be in the overlay. And the commissioners said, we don't care. We're going to take it out of it. We're not going to put it in the overlay. So that's the best worst case scenario, except for the historic board wasn't brought into it to basically argue to the city commission, no, it should be because it's south of 32nd. That's the historic district. You can't make two lots different than the whole rest of the area, okay? I don't think that's what really happened, but if the historic board had been brought into it, we could have given them advice, as we're supposed to do, about that. And so, not being that meeting years ago, I don't know what was told to the commissioners and whether they were even aware that it was in the historic district. My guess would be probably it wasn't. My point is, I'm always in the belief that as long as the citizens have a platform to tell the commission something, it doesn't make a difference what the commissions rule on. It's when rulings are made and the proper protocol aren't followed where people who are this board, which is established to give advice about those very things, was left out. And so that, I use that as a cudgel in the future to show what happens if the city or the commission ignores what they're supposed to be doing. And so, again.
And because it was a change from institutional or commercial to residential, and the density was less severe rather than going from residential to institutional, then it was less of a problem. But if it had gone the other way, we'd be in the same position.
Well,
It would have been ignored.
It just strikes me that there's 2 homes that can be 4 stories built on Paso Roble. They're the only 2 homes, and they're
So now
south of
with those being
32nd.
outside of our boundaries, we don't get design review on those parcels, and they don't have to comply with our design standards, so.
Well, right,
They
but,
should.
you know, it wouldn't have been a problem to just make it RM/PAG, like the bottom of Paso Roble is, you know, like everything else it's the only residential zoned area that's not in the overlay that's south, you know, and by statute, I always say that, or ordinance, it says everything south of 32nd, which it clearly is supposed to be in the overlay. So, you know, I mean, I guess we could go pull the minutes and find out what was actually said and who voted on it and what representations were made to the commission as to why, if the overlay was even mentioned, and if it was mentioned, why it was said not to put it in the overlay.
I think without assuming, we should find out what the facts are rather than,
But we are, except for, I'm not assuming, what I do know
we
is
don't
it's
know,
not in the.
we
I
don't know what the process was and what was said and what
Yes.
was presented,
But here's my point, Jennifer. We do know it's not in the overlay.
right?
And we do know the historic board, who is empowered to give advice, shall give advice about those things, was not brought into it. And as I said, even if they knew all that stuff, best case scenario, and they still voted that way, that's fine.
I know
Well,
you want to see things, we are aware of that. I don't, to keep going back and to question things, we need to move forward.
I've already said it's spilled milk. I'm using it as an example of when the city or the commission or whatever does not follow. When things say pass a grill address, then it should automatically kick in. It's a historic district, and the historic district should have some say into it. And this is a perfect example where it didn't happen, and somebody benefited and somebody did not benefit. Whatever the vote was. So, okay, I guess
And
that's.
are there any other parcels out there that might have the same scenario? Or these, the last lot like this?
The only other properties that would be in the same situation would be the ones we just talked about, those two blocks of the commercial parcels. They don't
South
allow for
21st.
residents. Yes. So they are outside the overlay currently, and they would not need to come before this board presently, but,
And the other thing too is they're not residential,
right.
okay? And either one of those two lots there, they're rezoned as residential, which is different. If they kept it institutional and didn't put it under the overlay, I think I'd have a less complaint, but you know. Anyway, okay.
Is there an active building permit or application for plan review for those lots?
The
31,
We've seen the plans.
3101, 3105?
They were reviewed, I believe, last month as information items, and they have been approved. They are commencing.
Okay, now the alleyway widths. Thank you for that nice map.
Sure.
All the pretty colors.
This is just a continuation. It's what I could put together in a paint program quickly. It just shows the alleyway widths. I know we were talking about that in terms of accessibility from the rear of lots, if that's something that we require through the Division 20 amendments. So,
But yeah, that's what I wanted, because I know we're going to get to that in a minute here, but thank you. That's why I was asking the questions about the alleyway widths, because in ordinance 20, let's see. Oh, I think it's in the ones, hold on, the ones that the draft of what we're redoing. Under 2018, we have, this is some of the new language we're talking about. Parcels abutting an alley of at least 15 feet width shall not place parking in the front yard. So, and I can't, on the colors here, I can't somewhat, are there east-west alleys?
primarily all of the east-west alleys south of 12th Avenue are 10. They're platted as 10 feet.
Right.
So,
And so, is 10 feet wide enough for a car to go down? Yes. So I'm wondering whether, when we redo that, we should change that from at least 15 to at least 10. Because otherwise, what we're doing is that old section of Paso Grill, which is south of 12th, that has parking on both sides of the street. Okay? Street parking, because the streets are wider, I think. As you get north of the park, they only park on one side of the street. And so if you take those alleys down south of 12th, let's say, and you build a new home, and you don't, and you say that the alley has to be 15 feet and all the alleys are 10 feet, then we're just gonna be giving people the encouragement to do curb cuts in front of their house, not only taking away parking, but facing garages to the street, and we don't want that. So I think we need to change this proposition, or change it to 10 feet. So, because that's really where it's the problem. There's not a whole lot of them, but there's a few houses down there that are new builds, and, you know, they've taken a parking space away because there's a curb cut, and now they've got their car, golf court, and a garage door, everything's just sitting in the front yard, where all the other old houses, it's all in the backyard, so you have to see that. And obviously maintaining the look of the historic area, we wouldn't want to do that. And the alleys do exist, and many people do use them, but I wouldn't want to change this to make it so that, you know, we can't make the alleys any wider. So I know Tara's not going, we aren't going to talk to Tara today.
Not today, no.
But that's something that we need to bring up with her. Does that make sense? And that's why I wanted to see the map, because I wasn't
And
sure.
how would that change go about being made?
Well, we just changed 15 in this proposition here in blue ink, that we just changed parcels.
So we can do it, and it's in the language of our,
This is what
Yes.
we're proposing for change. We just changed that from 15 to 10. And then-
During this little canvassing project of the alleyways, were there any fences or trees found to be inside those 10-foot or 15-foot or inside the alleys?
I know there are some out there. This was just based on looking at the plats. I didn't actually do a
Okay.
drive-through
Not-
for
Not
those.
actually driving.
Yeah, right, and which is
Not
fine.
driving, not
That's
walking
all that
down.
matters, really, is the plat. you know.
Yeah, like-
This is, we're
like
going to
maybe
put this
4
into the
feet.
garbage pickup issue.
Right.
Okay, well, that helps me out, because I wanted to make sure before we went in front of there and asked, you know, to change things, to do what we were talking about as far as the alley widths and stuff.
Very good.
Anybody else have any questions about alleys or anything of that nature?
Is there anything that we need to do formally to make that change or make that recommended change?
Well, we need to get, when I guess we can get that information to Tara, but when we ultimately
Have the workshop.
have the workshop, we can just start crossing stuff out there, right? Yeah, or adding things.
One thing that will come up, because I know this has come up with rear access and some of the alleyways that are obstructed, is that is going to affect the rear setback of the home generally. If it's somebody who's building to the maximum in the rear lot line, it's just, you know, to swivel the vehicle in, you need a little bit more space. So I'll talk to Tara as well, just to see if she has any
Right. because-
justification for making it 15 or more. There might be something I'm not thinking of.
Well,
So-
yeah, okay, but if we make it 15, then none of those have to do it, because the alley's 10 feet and it's platted 10 feet, and the city's not gonna take away 5 feet of the
No.
people's property. So that means we're telling everybody, go ahead and do that, which is, I think on balance, that's not a good thing. But the other thing is, because the nature of Pass Girl and the way it was developed and was built, those are the older homes down there, that maybe we have to talk about the setbacks in some fashion. I don't know whether we, you know, maybe we let them be wider but not as deep. I don't know, you know, but I think that's a pretty important issue, especially for the future, if we're going to change the whole look of every new home with a garage door facing the street. And then, as you know, parking's already crazy down there, and you start taking more spots away, then it's going to be even worse. So,
Understood. Okay.
okay, now we have the proposed amendments, which is, again, the draft from what we did before. I guess there are some changes. And I have before we get into that I have a couple, this all applies to this, the overlay, but these are questions, Brandon, that you might know the answer to. The street ends, I assume they're in the overlay. I don't know if it ever says that anywhere, or that's just you know, you follow what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, they don't look like they're carved out on the map, on the outline.
No, I'm talking about, you know, the street caps, like where the road runs to
Water.
to water, yeah, on the bay side.
Yeah, so typically the zoning district of the abutting parcel goes to the midway of the midpoint of the street, but with several of these street ends in Paso Grill, they're actually handled through our recreation open space division. They're regulated through that. They're not explicitly under the overlay, but what are you bringing this up for? Just to say if, you know?
Which point, Bill?
Where you going, Bill?
Well, I will tell you, no, it is, because it has to fit in with, you talk, later in there, we talk about the vacation of alleys and street ends.
Right.
Okay? And so, are the street ends in the overlay when we say that? Because that makes it a little bit different as to how you.
And then somebody wants to build a house on
Well,
it.
no, there's a whole nother issue out there that I don't need to talk to, but I'm going to talk to you after this briefly, okay? That's out there that I'm concerned about and for not in the future. But, so I would like some clarification, like how we deal with those street ends. I mean, I know we had the conversation a while ago about how, are they paved or shelled and all that kind of stuff, and we felt that was something for the historic board, and that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about if it's zoned into the overlay, you kind of answer. You said it was midway between the two zones. So as long as both sides of the alley are residential, then it's all under the overlay, I assume.
Right, and in terms of vacation, it's not, and this is citywide. Any street end that runs to the water can't be vacated. That's in our charter.
Right. I remember you told me the other day, and that's what I have a follow-up question about after the meeting. I want to ask you about. Okay. You know, rumors go flying, but okay. Let's see. These are just some questions that I wrote after I was looking through this stuff. And we talked about, I was wondering why we even want to put the commercial builds in the overlay since none exist in the overlay. We can talk about that later at a workshop or something. Okay, that's all I had. But do we want to talk about the discussion here? Anybody have anything they want to comment about the proposed amendments? I mean, we just mentioned changing maybe the alley. I do have some things here that, you know, if we go to 20.01, the purpose of an intent, I want to get down into that.
Section
Very
2001.
very beginning, very first page.
Yep.
And this is minor, but I think I don't, if we don't do it now, I don't know what we're going to say it. The very last sentence is within the district. And what district are we talking about? The overlay district or the historic district? I assume it's the overlay. I'm sure it's the overlay district, but we ought to clarify that.
I think we talked about that, and Tara was going to go through, right, in the last?
Well, no, she did change everything to say Pasco Historic Overlay District, okay? So that's taken care of. But at the very end of that, it just says within the district, and I think that's essentially a bit confusing. We need to say again, within the Paso Grill Historic, we always make it consistent. And there's, well, I'll get to it, but, you know, in 20.07, which is on density, in 20.07C, we've got, you know, the third sentence base, or third line, construction prior to insert adoption date. So I think we need to find out that date, right? Whatever that could be.
Fix that.
Which letter are you looking at?
20.07C, and it's the third, B, and actually there's two of them. There's one in B and one in C, where you see a paren, insert adoption date. So we need to have the adoption date
right.
in there, right?
Right.
Let me see, yeah. Okay, if you go to 2014, which is essentially, it's a new proposal all the way around. If you go to the last paragraph, which is paragraph B, and it says, determine if recommending the parcel split or assembly will support, and don't we need to also include vacation of easements and right-of-ways in there as well? Not just parcels and splits? Again, that's just housekeeping, but it seems to me we
So for split, assembly, or vacation of parcels, easements, and right-of-ways?
yes, I think it just needs to be included in there. And then that strikes me back on, okay, and does this conflict 2014, or is it consistent with 20.07? On 20.07, I want to make sure we're not repeating ourselves or leaving something out. On 20.07, subsection D, the part that's been added, it allows Historic Preservation Board and Board of Adjustment, when applicable, to give information about, that's 2 lots of record being combined to accommodate additions to existing structures. And then when we go to 2014,
So 2014 lays out more of the procedure. 20.07 is just a hard limit on 2
Okay.
2 assembled parcels.
okay, so you don't think they're consistent with each other, and I thought they probably were
Believe so.
too, but I just thought that I wanted to make sure we know we're kind of talking about that in 2 different areas.
And what if, rabbit hole item warning, what if a lot of record is larger than average, and we're joining 2 larger than average lots of record, and then that's okay, even though it might be a 100-foot lot?
Or 100 plus.
Or 100 plus, or...
I mean, 50 by 100 is technically a platted lot, so if we're talking about something that's
the conforming-
52 and you add it to a 52, what then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I was thinking even bigger than that.
Yeah,
But,
it was something that would allow you to get almost 3 lots out of it when it's combined,
yeah.
Right, and let me, and sorry, speaking of rabbit holes.
or 150 feet.
If you go to 20.07, and I'm going to read this out loud, okay? D, subsection D, no more than 2 lots of record may be combined to accommodate additions to existing structures, okay? And assembly is reviewed. Now, is that saying that 2 lots do not get reviewed? Because it says no more than 2 lots. And so I don't know if they're saying that 3 is just an impossibility.
This isn't saying without review. This is saying that doesn't even come to review because it's not happening. So 2 lots comes to review. More than 2 lots, it's not happening.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You can almost read it both ways, is what I'm saying. I want to be clear. That's what I was hoping it was saying. I want to make clear that 2 lots,
That's the most you can have, if I'm reading this right.
Is
It's
that
no more
correct?
than 2 lots.
So
And
somebody-
it comes to us for review.
right, so
Right.
so it's, you can't put 3 lots together.
No, correct.
And
Without
that's-
review.
Huh?
Without
No,
No, just
review or
period.
no review, you can't
okay.
join 3 lots together.
No more than 2, so 1 lot or 2 lots.
And does that apply to every, but that's an overlay.
Well, what this is saying is combined to accommodate additions to existing structures, not new
Understand.
builds.
Yeah. So Okay, I understand, but I just want to make sure I can see why that would be the case. I just make sure that's what it's saying, and that's what we're talking about. So, if you had a house and you decided that you wanted to build on both sides of it and you had enough money, you could buy both properties on both sides and knock those houses out and then add on to your house. You couldn't do that because that's 3 lots.
Correct.
Is that the example we're talking about?
Yes.
And like where the Bush estate was, I assume those 3 lots were all together anyway to start with. I'm not trying to think back, I'm just saying that's the only
I see
place
what
I
you're
can
saying.
think of where there's one house now built on where there was 3 lots.
Can they combine 1 lot or 2 lots with the already existing lot? And it looks like they can get 1 more lot.
Yeah, they can't.
For a total of 2.
Yes, okay. But that again is just for the overlay, which means if it's not in the overlay, that doesn't control, right?
Correct.
Of course. Okay. Okay, and now I'm down to 2019. At the very, very last sentence, which would be under, I guess that's E2.
Page 42, Holly.
That's actually on 43, well, on the new one, it's on page 43, but. So it says that if an impact to the landscape and elevated building criteria needs to be reduced, justification shall be provided that demonstrates a need for the driveway. The priority would be transportation, circulation, and safety, and shall be reviewed and determined by the city. And that just strikes me as one of the few times just the word city was used. Now, is that something that we really should go in front of the historic board for a certificate? And I know it probably wouldn't come up very often, but is that?
Staff or commission or historic board rather than the word city.
Yeah, I just think it's a poor choice of words, and I mean, it obviously wouldn't come up very often under the circumstances of what they're talking about, but I mean, I hope you all recognize that my nitpicking is so we don't, have these issues
So there's no
in the future, there's no,
confusion as to exactly what was meant.
yeah. And this is, okay, if you want to go on, now I'm at 2023,
What page is that on?
46 or 47.
According to the overall, it's 133 of 146, if you're trying to get all the way down.
Yeah, okay,
to
you're
the
right,
packet.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it depends on you. And actually, that's what my question, it's about the numbering or the statutorily, how you construct stuff, okay. If you look at that, 2023, and we go near the bottom of it where the blue proposals are, it goes, and if you start at the beginning, we have 2023, we have A, B, C, D, E, all right, and then suddenly the design guidebook pops up. Is that under E? It's not, right?
No, that should,
But should it be F? I don't know. Maybe it should be its own special, subsection 2 or something like that. We should renumerate everything. And then under that, suddenly it has, looks like C pops up. So it strikes me that design guidebook, I mean, we've got to stick it in somewhere, and that's a good place to stick it, but we need to have it renumbered or relettered.
Mm-hmm.
And probably it should be 2023, 1, A through E, and then 2 being design.
and with this with design guidebook, well, it's under 20.22 as well.
Right.
We might just make that its own section because it applies in the same manner to both.
Okay, well, I agree, So that,
So,
and again, that's just, it probably would go better in, yeah, it should, I think, but can we create our own, do we have room to create our own section, a new section?
Can.
Okay. All right. Okay. Then in 2024, I think we have, follow me on this, okay? I'm going to read it as we have it proposed. Any applicant shall be subject to the city's permit process and shall submit, okay? So the shall submit applies to everything below that.
Yes.
Okay, number A, architectural elevations, okay, that makes sense. And all the things that go along with that. B, landscape and elevated screening, that makes sense, that they shall submit that. C, the city's architect shall review that, that's not in the right place. You follow what I'm saying? Because
Yes.
you're asking them to submit something, and that's something that isn't submittable.
okay.
Okay, so I think, and then D is Historic Preservation Board. That's not a shall submit either. So I would suggest we have shall submit, and it should be number 1, A, architectural elevations. And then with 1, 2, 3 below that, B, landscape and elevations. And then when we get the city's architect, that should be its own subheading as 2, and historic preservation should be its own subheading as 3. And then I think, well, E, that should probably be a shall submit, right?
I agree.
So we should actually bump that
Yeah.
up and add that up to subsection 1. Everyone follow me on this?
Yeah, it's going up
It's
to B.
confusing.
Yes.
It's going to become C or something, yes.
Yeah, it should be C up there, right?
And then the waste management plan as well. That's
should be
something you
D.
would want to say, right? Okay.
And then we go to 2, architect, 3, historic preservation. And that gets us through that. So those are what I got on section 20. Anybody else have anything on section 20 they want to talk about?
Have we,
So what we're at now, we need to get a clean, a new draft of some of the clean things. So when we do the workshop, I think everything that we still have a little bit of questions out, we can hash that out in the workshop. Is that?
But now we're in order.
Huh?
Now you've done a little housekeeping.
Yes.
We'll draft this up for next month. We'll include it as an information item. Did the board have any other items?
I don't, well, I was asking anybody else if 20, and if we go to 40, the CRD, this is something really more for Tara. In the first purpose and intent, personally, and at the very end where it says, and uses shall be compatible with the character of existing historic structures within the CRDEA district. And I would like to see more language in addition to just existing historic structures, like where we talk about size and scale and compatibility. Well, it does say compatible in there now.
So structures and character.
Right. And that's just for prevention, you know?
Character is before existing structures, compatible with the character of existing historic structures.
Well, it says that. I guess I'm really trying to ram it home.
Right.
You know, that we don't have, there's no wiggle room in the future about, oh, well, you know, it is 20 feet higher, but it is compatible. You know what I mean? So that's why I think we could put some size and scale language, which is similar to the purpose and intent that we have in the overlay and always have had. So I'd like to mirror that a little bit more. That's my suggestion, and I think that makes sense. And then in 4015, under this design review and required drawings, that has that same statutory construction problem we had just a minute ago. Where, you know, we've got shall submit the city architect and the
And
waste man.
it's identical. so
Yeah, we just need to
it's that too.
redo the numbering on that, or lettering on that. Anybody, anything else on section 40? Okay, so let's see, if we don't have anything more on that, now we're going to the next meeting, which is July 11th. And I would like to say I'm pretty positive I will. There's a possibility I will be here, but I think it's very unlikely. So
I also won't be here.
that's why I brought it up, because I figured we might have problems with that. Well, I don't think we've had a July meeting in a number of years, actually, but I'm just pointing that out, so.
Well, it sounds like we really only have these modifications to make for next month. We have several cases for you in August, but nothing on for the agenda in July, so this works out well. What we'll do is we'll make these changes, we'll distribute them, you can look them over, and then we'll have them on for the agenda in August.
Good, because especially when we're doing our workshop, it'll probably be September, I would think,
Right.
because, right, we talked about the
Okay.
the commissioners don't come in until the last week of August, so we would. Okay.
And one quick announcement before we adjourn is since we're not going to meet before then, 4th of July, Paso Grill Golf Cart Parade. Lineup is at 8:30 at the museum, in front of the museum on 10th Avenue, and then the parade starts at 9.
Anything else? Anyone?
Got nothing.
Okay, adjourned.